Mr. Purdon, Mr. Gert, are we ready to begin the board meeting?
Yes, Chairman Howell.
Thank you. I will now call the regular meeting of the Louisville Metro Area Pollution Control Board to order. We're conducting the meeting today by video teleconference and in person at the Edison Center. The first thing we have on the agenda this morning, see if we have a quorum. I will conduct a roll call of board members that are present on this teleconference. When I call your name, please say yes. Dr. Colbert?
Yes.
Dr. May? Candace White?
Yes.
Thank you. Marissa O'Neill? Thank you. Sitting around.
I understand.
Okay. Dr. Gorse?
Yes.
And Steve Sullivan?
Yes.
I got everyone. Okay. First thing we have on the agenda this morning, do we have any introductions this morning?
Morning, everyone. Hoping that you all can still hear me. I'm frozen up a bit.
We can
We
just
can.
now.
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Okay, my apologies, everyone. There are no introductions today.
Okay, thank you. What about public recognitions this morning, Mrs. Hamilton?
I do have some public recognitions this morning. Thank you, Chairman Hilton. First, these district staff deserve recognition for their dedicated service. 5 years, Kevin Clusta, Andy Purdon, Laura Wilson, Marty Hazlett. 15 years, Naratip Chitradon, Shannon Hosey, Randy Shanebackler. 20 years, Billy DeWitt, Air Monitoring Manager. 25 years, Dee Lynch, Community Outreach Coordinator. Please join me in recognizing each of these outstanding air quality professionals for reaching these significant milestones.
Thank you.
Second, I have more today, Mr. Chairman. It's a big week. Second, while next week includes Administrative Professionals Day, I'd like to recognize staff today who are key to the district's air quality mission and to the board for your work as well. Sherry Steiner, Executive Assistant, Andy Purdon, Info Systems Analyst, Kevin Clusta, APCD Records Coordinator, Donna Anthony, Management Assistant, and Monica Little, Administrative Coordinator. Finally, I'd like to recognize Byron Gary, who will be leaving the district on Friday to join the Kentucky Resources Council as an attorney, where we understand he'll be tasked with making good trouble. While we're pretty sure our paths will likely cross in the future, we will miss you, Byron. Our loss, though, is the environment's gain. And with that, Chairman Hilton, I turn it back to you.
Thank you so much. Congratulations on the person that she acknowledged. And also I'd like to, on behalf of the board, like to thank Byron for all your help for the board and interpretation of the regulations and ease of the some of the situations, questions that we have for you. You always get back to the board members in a very timely manner. So on behalf of the board, I wish you much success and good luck in your new job assignment.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the privilege of being able to serve the board these past several years in the district, these past 8.5 years. It's been an honor.
Thank you very much. We will miss you.
Thank you.
Any questions from the board? Comments?
Well, I would just second that. Byron, it's been a pleasure working with you. Done a great job.
Thank you.
That's what you.
Thank you. Okay. Next thing on the agenda, approval of minutes. We have the public hearing. Are there any questions or comments regarding the public hearing that was held on February the 9th, 2023?
Not for me.
Hearing none. The minutes are stand approved. We also have the regular meeting minutes of the March 16th board meeting. Are there any questions, upgrades, or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, the board minutes stand approved. Thank you very much. Next thing on the agenda is public comment. Do we have anybody listed for a public comment this morning?
Nobody's registered here, Chairman.
Thank you. No unfinished business this morning. No scheduled new business. Committee reports, I don't think the committee's met in the last month. Have they?
No, Chairman, no.
Thank you. Staff report, Mrs. Hamilton.
Thank you very much, Chairman Hilton, and good morning, everyone. This morning, I'm joining you from Chicago, where several of us are attending US EPA's National Air Toxics Conference, and more about that in a bit. The district is happily celebrating Earth Week this week with a special event each day, including a salad pitch-in after this meeting, a guided Central Park Earth Walk, a Go 365 walking challenge, and a Central Park Amphitheater beautification project for the Mayor's Give-A-Day. Our thanks to the district's social committee and Rachel Smith, administrative manager, for the awesome arrangements. As part of our celebration, the district has also participated in Tree Fest, which was last Saturday, and we will participate in the Party for the Planet at the Louisville Zoo on April 30th, where at each of these events, we're highlighting our outreach programs, CARE, Long Care for Cleaner Air, Grow More, Mow Less, all of which provide information about air quality and assistance to our community to reduce air pollution. I am very happy to report that yesterday US EPA proposed to find the Louisville area in attainment of the National Ambient Air Quality Standard for ground level ozone. As you know, the district and the Kentucky Division for Air Quality submitted a redesignation request in September 2022 based on air monitoring data collected from 2019 through 2021. And more recent data continued to show the area meeting the standard. The public comment period for this proposed action will end on May 18th. EPA will then issue their final decision after the end of the public comment period. I do have to say it's especially gratifying to see this proposal in print. It's been a really long time coming from EPA. Byron Gary, along with Craig Butler, our environmental coordinator, air monitoring, program planning, emissions inventory staff, and a host of others were instrumental in developing this proposal. And my thanks to everyone. We will keep the board up to date as we move through EPA's approval process. We certainly hope to see that approval soon this summer. To help the board as we look for the person to fill Byron's spot as regulatory coordinator, Michelle King has graciously offered to serve the board as interim secretary treasurer. So till we do find that new replacement, plan on seeing emails from Ms. King with board materials. Additionally, as specified in Regulation 1.19, Ms. King will now receive petitions for administrative hearing from parties appealing final decisions of the board or the district. And as a reminder, the right to request an administrative hearing is limited to a period of 30 days when the person has had actual notice or could reasonably have had notice of the order or action, including the district's issuance of permits. Once filed, please be mindful that Regulation 1.19 in Section 9.5 specifies that there shall be no communication concerning the merits of a proceeding between a party to the proceeding, a person interested in the proceeding, or the representative of a party or interested person, and a board member. You all have a special role to play, and for that reason, questions regarding case status or procedural issues are to be addressed to the Secretary Treasurer. Get that open. Last night, Ms. King from Chicago also was joined by Dr. Rochelle Duval of EPA's Office of Research and Development for a presentation to the West Jefferson County Community Task Force on the next phase of EPA's odor research in Louisville. This new work builds on EPA's previous work by coupling their Odor Explorer app with a remotely operated canister sampler, or a ROX, that can be remotely triggered by text or app data and will allow for a sample of volatile organic compounds to be collected. Sampling in real time when people are observing an odor, we hope, of course, will help us identify those emissions that may be the source of that odor problem. EPA is going to begin testing the ROX systems locally, and I'm very grateful that several community members have already signed up last night to help EPA with testing that system. Michelle, I see you're on the call. Is there anything more you'd like to add on that?
No, I think you covered it well. We're excited to be partnering still with EPA on this work, and really thankful to the West Jefferson County Community Task Force for giving us an opportunity to speak with our community and find some volunteers that are interested in helping this work.
Thank you. All right, now on to air toxics. So EPA's Office of Air Quality Planning and Standards is hosting this National Air Toxics Conference. And this is the first one in 17 years. Air toxics risk assessment and communication has really evolved over those years, and important emerging issues have been identified that require the combined efforts of the federal government, state, local, and tribal air quality and air toxics and air regulatory professionals. After 17 years, you can imagine there is a lot to talk about. So EPA planned 3 separate in-person tracks for the conference, focusing on risk communication, risk assessment, and new tools, including risk models, technologies like the SPOD Next Generation Emissions Measurement Systems that were installed in and around Rubbertown as part of EPA's RARE project, and newly proposed air toxics rules. As a result, Ms. King and Matt King, Environmental Engineering Manager, have joined me here so that we don't miss a presentation. Several of the planned presentations focus on ethylene oxide, a new and emerging contaminant, and on EPA's newly proposed new source performance standards for the synthetic organic chemical manufacturing industry and national emission standards for hazardous air pollutants for the synthetic organic chemical manufacturing industry and group 1 and 2 polymers and resins industry. That's a really big title, so I'm going to call it by its nickname, the Hazardous Organic NESHAP, or the HON for short. I usually try to avoid those acronyms, but please bear with me. That title is only slightly less clunky than the actual proposal, which in its current form, it's not been published in the Federal Register. It's 440 pages in its pre-publication form. It is a whopper of a regulation, and the proposal focuses on 6 sources that emit 6 chemicals: ethylene oxide, chloroprene, vinyl chloride, ethylene dichloride, benzene, and 1,3-butadiene. And it requires some sources, among other things, to conduct fence line monitoring. It's our understanding that EPA plans a 60-day public comment period that will begin when their proposal is formally published in the Federal Register. We expect that to happen in the next few days. Currently, in the meantime, a cross-functional group of permitting, compliance, air monitoring, and program planning staff are reviewing the proposal, and we will be prepared to share with the board at its May meeting specifics about the proposal and how it may apply to sources in Louisville. Are there any questions about my report at this point?
Mrs. Hamilton, of those 6 compounds, I think we only have 3 of those in Rubbertown. Is that true?
So with those, there may be, we do not have any emissions of ethylene oxide nor chloroprene.
Chloroprene
So-
was yeah.
Yeah, and I do have to say that, you know, right now, this National Air Toxics Conference is incredibly timely. This rule that EPA has proposed is focused on those emissions in particular, and especially within an area in Texas and in Louisiana. But there will be benefits to areas like ours where we have industrial complexes that do use other chemicals covered by this rule. EPA has identified that there are 4 sources in Louisville that may be subject to this rule. And again, it is a big regulatory proposal. It's not one single national emission standard for hazardous air pollutant or a single new source performance standard. It is a brand new proposal focusing on fence line monitoring and then revisions to several of our most important new source performance standards and NESHAPs. So it is very complex, and we'll want to be sure that we understand the proposal and again, how that may apply to sources in Louisville. And we will share that with the board when we come together in May.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No.
No.
All right. Thank you very much. Moving on. This morning, staff from the district will be reporting on the recently completed air toxics monitoring report, July 2020 to June 2021. As everyone gets ready to join me in this presentation, I'd really like to recognize Billy DeWitt for his leadership early in this process. When knowing that the district would be required to install an auto GC system at Cannons Lane to monitor for photochemically reactive compounds, he recommended that we purchase and install a second auto GC system to monitor many of those same compounds in Rubbertown where they are directly emitted, and equally as important, provide near real-time air toxics monitoring data for the community, since many of those photochemically reactive compounds are also air toxics of concern that were identified in the West Louisville Air Toxics Study and are regulated under the STAR program. This early work has led to the district becoming the first program in the nation using an auto GC to focus on air toxics. And it also led to our collaboration with US EPA's Office of Research and Development on their RARE projects, which are ongoing. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the RARE projects next month when we look at EPA's HON proposal. But I also want to share my thanks for these people as well. I really want to thank Keith Talley for trusting us in 2015 when we went to him and told him we were going to do this. I want to thank Ms. King for her continued work to coordinate, communicate, and develop research projects with EPA to benefit our community and improve air quality. Andrea Cooley, APCD environmental chemist, and Brian Paris, APCD data analyst and air toxics supervisors, deserve praise for their efforts in standing up this new equipment and essentially developing this new application to monitor air toxics, and also for their expertise and patience in developing the quality assurance protocols and processes to provide valid data. Their work has benefited all the other users of this auto GC system nationally in the photochemically reactive work under PAMS. And I know that not only do I have a great deal of praise for them, but I hear it and am hearing it here at this conference as well for their efforts. And finally, to Matt Mudd for preparing the report in clear and easy to understand terms. With that, are we ready to provide the slideshow?
Pulling it up now.
Thank you so much. All right, I think we can go to the first slide. This project is extremely important for the district for a number of reasons, some of which I've already explained. It's important because it allows us to understand the source of photochemically reactive emissions in comparison to our required photochemical assessment monitoring at our NCORE site at Cannons Lane, because it provides information to our community in near real time and to the board, and because it provides information to the district about how our STAR program is operating, and also how we as air quality professionals can use this information to strengthen and improve our program. With that, I'd like to turn it over to the next presenter.
Hello, Billy DeWitt, Air Monitoring Program Manager with APC, and just want to give you some background on the genesis of our air toxics monitoring project. It all began with some regulatory changes that EPA made in 2014 to the ozone National Ambient Air Quality Standards. And this required some changes in the way that photochemical assessment monitoring stations were located and designed. And those are the stations that monitor volatile organic compounds that are precursors of ozone. And as part of this reassessment, the EPA required these PAMS measurements to be co-located with existing in-core or national core sites in areas with a population of 1 million or more, irrespective of our NAC status and ozone. And so APCD had one of these in-core sites established in 2009 and 10. And so we were mandated to begin monitoring for PAMS according to this rule. This rule also required hourly volatile organic compound measurements as opposed to the classic canister with the averaging period. Those previous PAMS or air toxic monitoring projects that captured a snapshot of the air in intervals that depended on setting out the canisters and then an evacuated canister and then pulling in a known amount of air and usually averaging that over 24-hour period. That canister would then be taken back to the lab, the auto GC mass spec unit, and be analyzed there. And that's a tried and true method, but it means that short-term spikes were not measured. And so EPA wanted to refine temporal resolution on that. So they began as part of this PAMS re-engineering, EPA, that is laboratory evaluation of 8 of these auto GC units in the spring of 2014. They whittled that down to a field evaluation of 6 units in 2015. And by the end of that project, there were really only 3 units that passed all the measurement quality objectives that EPA was looking for. And so without officially endorsing those units, it was made clear that those 3 were kind of the winners of this auto GC shootout, so to speak. The University of Louisville was performing air toxic study via the canister method through 2013, and this was ended to a loss of funding. And so we viewed the auto gas chromatograph technology as a potential to continue collecting data and get some of that hourly concentration data. We already knew that we were required to implement one of these systems for PAMS program at a later date. I know that's a lot of small text there. That's a list of just all the facilities in that Rubbertown main complex. And so when we were looking to locate the auto GC, we looked at the West Louisville Air Toxic Study locations. We looked at University of Louisville Toxic Study locations. And of course, we have an existing monitoring site on Algonquin Parkway, which is just northeast of the main complex. And that's directly downwind of the predominant wind direction. And so it was deemed the maximum cumulative concentration area for all the chemicals moving downwind of the complex. And it was also noted as such during the University of Louisville study and the WLATS study.
That's the first time we've had a monitor on Algonquin Drive, I think, isn't it?
Well, the canister samples were also taken there during the West Louisville study and the
Right.
University of Louisville study, but it's the first hourly concentration for VOCs we've had. When we were looking at what to measure, initially look at with the auto GC, we took the VOCs of concern from the original West Louisville air toxic study and wanted to continue measuring those as University of Louisville had done. And we also looked at emission inventory of a number of known ozone precursors that were reactive in the area. And not only that, we went ahead and added all the PAMS compounds and that were going to be required at our PAM site. So It was incredibly ambitious, to say the least. That's well over 60 compounds that we were trying to look for with this unit, as opposed to criteria pollutant network where an analyzer looks generally for just one compound. So we knew a lot of work was ahead of us with that project. I think with that, I'll pass it on to the real meat.
Morning, everyone. I'm Andrea Cooley, Air Monitoring Chemist with the district. And I'm going to cover kind of how the auto GC actually works. So the real advantage of an automated gas chromatograph is that it's field deployable. And its job is to collect and detect volatile organic compounds in gaseous samples. And this is all done independently of an operator. So 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the auto GC is collecting gaseous samples. Every hour that happens, a sample is collected. And it does that by following a pre-programmed sequence of methods. One of those methods might tell the auto GC, hey, collect an ambient sample. And then in the next hour, it might be quality control sample. And that could be a zero blank, where we want to assess the cleanliness of the system. Or it could be a standard, where it's analyzing a set of known VOCs at known concentrations. And those standards are then used to help us verify and validate the data that we're seeing in the ambient. So over a 24-hour period, 20 to 21 hours, the auto GC is collecting an ambient sample. In the remaining 3 to 4 hours, it's collecting one of those quality control samples.
Is that random?
No, it is pre-programmed, and it just follows that same sequence in a cycle.
Heard several, I mean, continually?
Continue. And regardless of whether it's an ambient sample or quality control sample, that sample actually gets split and goes to 2 different locations in the auto GC system. When it is split, it is trapped. So a collected sample is being trapped over a sampling period. Once we have those samples trapped, it's time to analyze them. So from the traps, those samples are released to 2 analyzers. And those 2 analyzers are actually 2 gas chromatographs. So within the whole auto GC system, there's actually 2 GCs. One of those is designed to analyze the lighter, more volatile VOCs, and the other is designed to analyze the heavier, less volatile VOCs. The system is capable of detecting hundreds of VOCs, and so we have those 2 components to help give us better data on the whole range of potential compounds. So what the auto GC actually does, or what a gas chromatograph actually does, is separate VOCs from one another so that you're actually getting an individual signal for each VOC. That's ideally what you want to happen. Rather than having, like, with the S pods, for example, you get a total VOC signal. With this, you get a signal for each unique VOC. And what that signal looks like is a peak. So if you go to the next slide, Byron, please. This is an example of raw data received from the auto GC. And it happens to be a standard run. So these are we know what to expect in this particular run. And this is a set of VOCs that are ozone precursors. But some of them are also part of the toxics. So benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, styrene are also in there. What we have on the x-axis, or the bottom axis there, is analysis time. And so remember, we collect and hold that sample and then release it for analysis. When that analysis starts, a clock also starts. And so what the GC does is assign a time in which each peak is detected. And that becomes the unique thing to identify what we're seeing in our samples. So benzene, for example, has a detection time of 600 seconds. So we would expect in every run for benzene's time to be the same, whether it's a standard or ambient. So the ones on the left that's the beginning, that's the 0-second mark. Those are the ones to be detected first. And then the ones on the right are detected last. The y-axis, sorry, did you?
I just one question.
Sure.
Look at those peaks. So in other words, what you said, each compound has its own fingerprint. Is there any interference or any compound that's pretty close that is?
Sure, and yeah, and that's part of the challenge with this. And you can even see, even in a standard run where it's a limited number of VOCs, it may be hard to tell here, but some of them are being detected very close
Oh,
with their delta,
okay.
yes. So the vertical or y-axis, that's the intensity of the peak. But what really matters in terms of calculating the concentration is the area of each peak. That's what gives us the concentration. So up until this point, we've collected a sample, trapped it, analyzed it and detected it, assigned, identified the peak based on its time, and then calculated a concentration based on its area. All of that has been done in an automated way with no operator needed. Once the data is collected, though, that's where a more extensive review is needed. And I start with a standard run like this. Make sure that each peak that we're interested in, so if we've selected, a set of VOCs, although it can detect hundreds, we're more interested in, a subset of that. So make sure those peaks are properly identified, and then use that standard run kind of like a template where we can overlay the ambient runs and use what we know from the standard to help us identify what's actually in the ambient data.
I have a question.
Sure.
I can't read the bottom scale there.
Yes.
So could you tell us, for that horizontal axis, how much time?
How long it is?
represented there?
So for this particular, so this is the heavies. This is an analysis of the heavier VOCs. That analysis time is about 36 minutes.
Going-
All the way across. Yeah.
That's good. So calculate the area underneath. I assume the time resolution is 1 second.
Could more like 10.
We're like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay. So
And it depends.
on those peaks, what those are, but typically how many seconds width there is for this piece? Some of them appear to be thicker than others. What's the typical time?
And that's what I was saying about the 10 seconds. Maybe I misunderstood your first question. The width of the peak is typically around
Typically around 10 seconds.
10, and that may be a little wide.
Yeah, but you have readings. That's the width of the peak. You have readings in between them. Of the intensity. If you're going to take the area into the curve.
Right.
So it's continuous reading.
Well, I assume it's recorded every second or every 100 milliseconds or something. That's what the resolution is.
Oh, okay. So the sample is collected over 40 minutes
Yeah.
and then released for analysis.
Okay.
And so that's what this looks like. So you're really just for 1 hour, whatever the area under the peak is, and then therefore the concentration, that's your hour views.
But that thing is reading continuously versus the read every
Well, it's reading
millisecond.
continuously, but it peaks. There's a data acquisition system which records values at every certain interval. Otherwise, there'd be an infinite number of readings. So
So you get an
what I'm
hour,
asking.
you get an hour. Different from like in the criteria world where it's minute resolution, right? Where you get a reading actually every minute. This is just every hour. Maybe I'm
I
not.
guess what I'm asking is how do you calculate the area under the curve? If you would expand that out, that curve instead of the peak.
Right. The software does all.
The software does that.
Yeah.
So in this curve, it looks like this.
Right.
There have to be a number of discrete readings along, taken every so often. Not an hour, 10 seconds, some increment. say if the width of that peak is 10 seconds, there's a number of readings in that 10-second period. So that you can use the values to calculate the area.
Count the line.
So, the area under the curve is, the whole area under the curve is representing the concentration for that VOC in that hour. Right?
Yeah.
So, as long as, that total area represents a single VOC, we don't really, not that we don't pay attention, we're not calculating anything that's happening across that.
What I think what he's asking, how many data points are on that curve?
Oh,
In essence, is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. It's another way of putting it.
okay.
I believe it's a total number of ions detected by the system.
It's a 40-minute
So it's a
sample.
total
So
count.
this is the,
The flame burns
Yeah.
the chemical and then it detects a certain number of ions and that's what that curve represents.
Moving on.
Okay. We can put,
There's a
we can
count.
have a false. Yes,
Yes. Okay.
You got all these engineers in here, so.
that's okay. I'm
Yeah,
not,
okay. That's good.
we can follow up too. Let's see, where was I? Byron, can you flip to the next slide for me for a second? Just
I have a real quick question.
Okay.
You save all this is archived, right, in case another chemical becomes a chemical of interest or compound of interest?
Yes, yeah, all the raw data is there.
I'm questioning, for sure, can it? What about these standards for each one of these compounds that you're trying to measure? These are standard samples that you put in the equipment to calibrate them, right?
Yes, so, and it's a mixture, so like
So what
one
about those Fisher Scientific or what? Or
air gas,
Okay.
in the past EPA has supplied them for it,
Right,
yes. And it's a mixture of those.
okay.
Okay, so, I think I had said, we use the standard as kind of the template to help us identify, what we're seeing in the ambient data. Okay, so.
We won't be able to understand that.
Oh, there we go.
Great.
Sorry.
That's okay. So it's not, we're not only just getting, the identity of the peak, but also that concentration.
Okay.
And so if we would, and so if we look at just the standard, this is a controlled sample.
Standard.
Same VOCs, same concentrations each time. But ambient air is very dynamic. We see different concentrations hour to hour. We see a different set of VOCs from 1 hour to the next. And so if we would zoom in on one of those compounds, and this is part of the review process, zoom in and just make sure there's not any of those other interfering VOCs, things that we're not necessarily interested in knowing concentrations for, but maybe interfering with the actual calculated concentration for the one we do care. And so because this happens, and for some of the VOCs we're really interested in, it happens routinely, we came up with a way to communicate both internally with the board and with the public how confident we are in the data being produced by the RGC. And so we call that our data quality scoring system. And I'm just going to summarize what the color coding means. So if we assign green to one of the VOCs of interest, that just means we have high confidence in the data being produced by the AutoGC. So both of those criteria are being met well, that the peak is properly identified, and that we are confident that the concentration being calculated is correct. Okay, so those will be assigned. When they're assigned yellow, our confidence is a little less, and we're just saying, with these results, exercise a little bit of caution when interpreting them. It could be biased high or low, because most likely there's an interfering VOC with the results, interfering with the results of the VOC we actually are interested in. For red data quality scores, we assign those to VOCs where the data produced by the AutoGC, we really have little to no confidence in. And that is generally because we may be able to identify them in the standard, but when we start looking at the ambient data, there's just so much being detected at the same time that we really can't confidently identify where that one we care about is, or maybe it's buried under some other more prevalent VOC. So if we look at, next slide, please, the time period for the air toxics report, July 2020 to June 2021. This is a summary of what the data quality scores were at that time for the 15 APCD target compounds in that report. The raw data quality score, what that means is before any review has been done, the result that the AutoGC provides, how confident are we in that result? The post data quality scores after I've done my review, then how confident are we in those results? Most of the ones at this time period from the target compound list were yellow, and that is because there are other interfering VOCs with many of those. So with those results, you just consider that they could be biased. 1,4-dichlorobenzene was a significant system contaminant during this time period. A lot of these toxic VOCs are really sticky, and they tend to linger in the AutoGC system for a while after they've been analyzed. And that's problematic because rather than collecting data that's representative of ambient air, you're actually just recording what the system is contaminated with. And so we assigned a red data quality score to 1,4-dichlorobenzene for that reason. Both acrylonitrile and carbon tetrachloride were particularly difficult to identify because of some of those interfering VOCs. So they also were given red. But data quality scores can evolve as we learn more, as we make modifications to the system. And so if we move forward to, next slide, please, to our current data quality scores and our current data confidence, you can see several of the compounds have turned from yellow to green, and 1,4-dichlorobenzene has turned from red to yellow. And the reason for that was we reduced the frequency that the toxic cylinder was being analyzed without sacrificing being able to quality assure data, but reducing that system contamination. And so now we can feel more confident that the values we're measuring are actually representative of ambient air rather than just system contamination. You'll notice that acrylonitrile and carbon tetrachloride, remember before, those were the ones that were red. Because we had such low confidence in those compounds, we're no longer collecting data on those two VOCs. Thank you. But because they are still present in the standard, I'm still doing a qualitative check for any spikes that may show up where I would expect to see carbon tetrachloride or acrylonitrile. And if those spikes would occur, then that would get reported up the chain. And my final slide, where can you access AutoGC VOC data? You want to see it. So one place is the Louisville Air Watch website, where hourly concentrations of select VOCs are shown. There's a little bit of a time delay because remember, it's collect the sample, analyze the sample, and so it's probably 3 hours before we'll actually see those hourly concentrations on the website when it is properly working. The air toxics report that you just received is another place where our VOC data has been reported, and it is on our website. That shows the annual averages of select VOCs from that July 2020 to June 2021 time period. The hourly VOC concentrations for those compounds, plus many more that the Algonquin AutoGC collected during the same time period, have now been reported to EPA's air quality system database. So those are available. Of course, you've been receiving monthly board reports that show monthly averages of select VOCs. And the ones you have received so far include September 2020 to July 2021 and August to December of last year. So why is there that gap? Why are you missing August 21 to July 22? And the reason is at the end of last year, when we were reevaluating how can we produce quality assured VOC data in a more timely and efficient manner, we kind of revamped how I was reviewing the data, but then also decided that it would make more sense to provide not only internally to say our compliance department, but also to the board and to the community, more recently collected auto GC data. Rather than looking way back, try to keep up with what's coming in a more timely manner. So with that though, there's still that backlog of about a year's worth of VOC data. Time and resources permit will get reviewed. Something to look forward to. In the not too distant future, you will start to see Cannons Lane auto GC data show up on your monthly board reports. Up until now, it's only been GC data from the Algonquin Parkway site. Today you received December of last year. We'll get January of this year, and then we'll get the February. That's when you'll see that comparison. So stay tuned for that. And if it's okay, I'm going to kick it back to.
Raise a question.
Okay, sure.
So on the 20 to 21 hour monitoring for ambient air and it's programmed, how do you make sure that you catch the whole 24-hour cycle at least sometime in case
Sure.
the emissions vary with
Very
time?
good question. And so the way that we've decided to accomplish that so that we're not running quality control checks at the same time every day, basically is what you're getting at. Yeah, so the way that I sequence the program, it bumps the start time for the first quality control check an hour each day. So eventually, you get all the hours represented. But yes, 3 to 4 hours, and those are together. The quality control runs together. Next day, it'll just bump up an hour for its start time. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
I just have one question. I remember when your coworker started working on this. This is a relatively new piece of equipment and so forth. So I guess the manufacturers at the time really couldn't share a lot of information. I get you guys really went out and did the work yourself, get this to the place where it is right now. Is that true?
Yes, that's very good.
Take credit, take credit.
Yes.
I thought so. I like to commend you guys for the work you've done on this. This is outstanding.
Thank you.
And it's relatively new type of equipment, so.
And particularly for trying to use it.
Yeah,
for measuring
GC, yeah,
NOx.
yeah.
So just want to briefly talk about some of the differences you see between the monthly board reports and the annual report. Obviously, the annual report has longer averaging time. And so that's more of an apples to apples comparison with like benchmark ambient concentrations that are used in the STAR program. As Andrea showed, her process in evaluating data quality has improved. And from the original board reports, it's just a lot like the criteria air quality reports. You're getting a very quick look at the data, but that data can change subsequent to further quality assurance. And so it's a more complete data set. And there's a lot of detailed background and explanations in the annual report that really lays out a lot of the things we're talking about here today. And some of the genesis of the project and some of the ongoing efforts. And then on those data reports, you'll see an ambient data summary, which is what has actually been measured with the auto GC. And then you'll see that compared in the table with benchmark ambient concentrations that are a foundation for the strategic toxic air reduction program. And the BAC for a carcinogen, or a BACC, is the concentration of attack that represents an additional cancer risk of 1 in a million over a lifetime. And I believe that's 70-year span, 24 hours a day is what that number's based on. And then over an annual basis. The BAC in the table for non-carcinogenic effects, or the BAC-NC, is the concentration of a toxic air contaminant at or below which no adverse effects are expected. So those are derived numbers based on many health studies. And we compare those because they've been around for a good while in the STAR program with what we're now actually monitoring. And for some more comparison of the data to some other benchmarks, I'll pass it over to Steve.
Hello, I'm Steve Brevet, Compliance Enforcement Manager. So now that we've got all these numbers, how do we use them? What do we look at? So in the past, in 2000, 2001, the district, EPA, Kentucky DAQ, West Louisville Air Toxic Study, and U of L had what's called the West Louisville Air Toxic Study. They went around for a year with the canisters. They got numbers that were decidedly too high. And we developed the STAR program based on that. So in the middle column, you can see the numbers that were reported for some of the compounds of interest. And then we've compared those to what we've got out of the auto GC now. We've seen a 96% decrease in the category 1 toxic air contaminants, which was the contaminants of concern that were in that West Louisville air toxic study, and an 80% reduction in all TAPs. So when the STAR program passed, the companies had to make modifications to their facilities, move production of some chemicals out, put in new control devices, change formulations. And this technology is allowing us to see the results of that program. Accurate.
Sure. Thank you, Steve. So in addition to what comparing to the West Louisville air toxic study tells us, we knew that one other thing that residents and other folks would be curious about is how kind of the area that we're monitoring in compares to some other areas. Of course, we'll be answering that going forward with the Algonquin Parkway Station compared to the Cannons Lane Station. But for now, we wanted to kind of take a look at some other monitoring stations throughout the country that are also monitoring for air toxics, and just give kind of some information so that people can kind of read through it. This is a part of the report. If you're going to get something out of it, I recommend taking some time with it. There's not many quick conclusions you can make, but with the help of people in our permitting section, we found sites throughout the country from areas with a range of population size, area type. What I mean by that is the reason for which the monitors were cited. Some of these are in really large cities compared to Louisville, near very large industrial hubs. Some of them are in similar sized cities in residential areas. So we just wanted to provide some context. What do air toxics concentrations look like in different types of areas? So as you can see, we have charts in the report like that. APCD's site compared to a few other sites. We have it listed by pollutant. You'll see I didn't really name the location, the city of the site in the chart. We were being a little careful. We don't want people to think this is a direct comparison between, say, Louisville and Atlanta, or Louisville and Detroit, which are both where those sites are located, because it's really, there's a lot of different considerations that go into where these were cited. Ours is a maximum impact site for Rubbertown. Like I said, some are just in a residential neighborhood in other cities. So it's not a direct city to city comparison. We just want to provide some context for how these types of areas compare. You can go on to the next slide. I've done kind of exactly what I just said we were trying not to do, and giving you some basic comparisons of the cities. These are the pollutants that were kind of measured in all different cities. Worth noting, most of them use the method that Billy talked about earlier, which is canister sampling once every 6 or once every 12 days. Houston is the only other one that uses an auto GC similar to ours, but they are only collecting PAMS compounds and sharing them in this manner. So not all of the same ones. As you take a look at this, if you look through the slideshow later, somewhere like Calvert City, Kentucky, that is a site that is cited specifically to measure a source of vinyl chloride and the impact of that source. So you can see it's higher in vinyl chloride, but the population size and there are no other, few other sources, and the population size is way lower than Louisville. So you can see some of the other compounds are way lower. Somewhere like Philadelphia or Houston, those are both cited to capture the emissions from very large industrial hubs in cities that are quite a bit larger than Louisville. So you'll see that there are some significant, there are some compounds that are significantly higher than here. There are some that are comparable. And you look at like Atlanta, Detroit, those are cited mostly residential areas with near some sources, and the Milwaukee source is one that's basically entirely in a residential area. So each in the report, each is linked to the Google Maps location of that monitoring site. So like I said, if you want to get something out of this area of the report, I'd recommend taking a pretty deep dive at it. It's kind of interesting once you get that look. So unless there are any questions, that's it on that part. I'll give it back to Rachel.
Could I just get one question? Absolutely. From Bill, I say to be the first to answer. One of the advantages of the ROGC is that you have readings every hour, basically. Yes. Instead of every 24. So I just want to ask you if you looked at any of that data and what are some interesting things to see, and do you plan to show us any of that data?
Sure, we'd be glad to show you. Andrea takes a look at the data daily, weekly, monthly, in different forms. Anything that, is a certain threshold that is higher than it normally is, we discuss that as a group. We bring in management, engineering, and just talk about that, what that might mean. Also, as we gather more data, we're going to try and look at if there are any specific, diurnal patterns that we see, and if that's related to any particular thing. There's been a few instances where we've seen some spikes of data with a couple of compounds, and we know those compounds are emitted together by, maybe a particular facility only. And so we were able to, kind of figure out, see if their process is going okay. So there's a lot of instances like that. And as we get further along in analyzing the data, we'll be glad to have some presentations and show you some trends on that.
Good, thanks.
Well, I'm impressed. It's very good. One other question I want to ask. You've got all this data. What is your confidence level with your data? Did you run analysis on the data, the confidence level, accuracy?
Well, we measure for accuracy with the standards
Right.
that are provided. And we use a lot of the, as a model for our quality assurance program.
Right.
We use the National Quality Assurance
Sure.
Project Plan that was generated for the PAMS project. Okay. And so we've tailored that specifically to what we do. I mean, we've expanded it as we were looking for some additional compounds. And so that's added a layer of
Confidence.
well, it's added a layer of confidence and another layer of difficulty for Andrea, but it's necessary to make sure that we feel confident in what we're looking at, is to have multiple very expensive standards run through the system. Right. And just to verify those measurement quality objectives laid out in the quality assurance project plan. That's a huge document. I'm glad to pass it along to you. If you're having trouble going to sleep, then.
This is not really a simple technology. I commend you and your coworkers for all this work that you've done. It's sure wasn't easy.
So
Well, it's easy
Chairman
to come
Hilton.
up with the idea and then pass it along to all other people.
Chairman Hilton, as those are great questions, and I really appreciate you all asking those. One of the benefits of being here at this conference is the opportunity to have conversations with our colleagues. And in fact, I had lunch with one yesterday and I had breakfast with another this morning, where what we talked about was the fact that in our work, we've had the tendency in the past to be isolated or siloed within our expertise. And so they're in air toxics monitoring programs that are part of a state agency. They are part of an air monitoring group within a state agency. For us, this is an agency responsibility. We rely on our air monitoring staff to do this excellent work. then we share it in a cross-functional way across the enterprise. When we have spikes, we get an email to management team members that a spike has been detected. And then we move in to determine, can we find the source of that spike? Some of the board members may remember that we identified a spike from an unknown source a few years ago when we had winds out of the winds out of the north and high water in the Ohio River. And it was 1,3-butadiene, and we're still unsure of that source. So collectively and collaboratively, we respond to those spikes. We pulled in our partners from the Kentucky Division of Waste Management, US EPA, and others in that instance. But each month, a cross-functional team of APCD professionals meet. It's a standing group of managers and a rotating group of air pollution control professionals who meet with the air monitoring program to look at the data. What we're looking for is trends. Are we seeing something that when we look through that annual average of the STAR program would cause concern? So we need to take a measure now to intervene. Is there an excess emission that may have occurred that we can help Andrea see in her data? And so this to me is one of the best things that we've done in our program to pull us together as air pollution control professionals to focus on a problem that is all our responsibility. And again, I'm speaking tomorrow. I plan to hit on this hard. This is all of our responsibility. It is not a program here or an operation there. It's our work. And it really is key. Air toxics are local. This is different than ozone, which has a regional component. It's different than particulate matter that may be coming in from miles away. Air toxics are local. This is our community. These are our neighbors. This is our work. And I'm extraordinarily proud of everyone here. In particular, because as Billy and everyone have explained, we know more about our complex airshed. We know more about our STAR program. We also know that we're going to know a whole lot more about ozone formation. And from an environmental justice and equity standpoint, we'll also be able to compare emissions in West Louisville to a more suburban setting in Louisville. We believe that that will help not only APCD evaluate its air toxics program, but our other partners, health researchers, land use planners, and other policymakers make good decisions. So with that, are there other questions that the board would like to have answered?
Any questions?
Well, I have a question, comment, may not be directly related. And I don't know much about it because I just saw this morning, was the report by the American Lung Association that identified pollutants across the country and talked about the most, air polluted areas. And you can put your zip code in and it pops up, well, Louisville, for example, which I did. And I didn't get that deep into it, but it gave us, it gives grades.
Right.
It gave an F, for example, on ozone, if we meet the criteria, which is
Right.
high. It gave us C's on PM 2.5, which were, if you look at the graphs that are presented, we meet those criteria, and I forget the third one. That strikes me as odd. I don't know.
So
You guys have seen that?
with respect to that report, and we can go into more detail in that in next month's board meeting and help shed some light on that. But it's nice to have a system where you get to choose the grading curve, but that is really based on our air quality index. And so that is measuring and grading us on a scale related to when we have a moderate day for ozone or PM, for example. So the good news is with that report, even though the letter grades may be disappointing, is it really reflects amazingly clean air across much of the country. I stand by that. Their grading has gotten harsher, but boy, the air has gotten cleaner in most places. One of our colleagues from California spoke yesterday. He's from the South Coast Air Quality Management District, and he just flat out acknowledged they have the worst air quality in the nation. And They do, but they have about one, if they were a state in that one air quality management district, they would be the 5th largest state in the nation. And so because there are still areas that have severe air pollution issues, criteria pollutant issues, that report from the American Lung Association is incredibly instructive and very helpful. And again, I'll be happy to dig into that for you next month, Mr. Sullivan. So we'll put that on the list too.
Well,
I
it
do
strikes
wanna-
me, well, excuse me, it strikes me from a PR perspective. When you pop it up on Apple News and you go and it's Fs, and that creates a general populace concern, it seems to me that may be misinterpreted.
Ms. Hamilton, I will, I think I've got that on tape, so if I can find that tape, I'll let you see it, but he's right. It
Okay.
did go over an F.
All right,
Our
well,
fault.
very good. You know, to be candid, our work is the continual work in progress. And that's just another way to look at it, so.
Okay. Any other questions for board members? If not, I'd like to thank everyone that took part in our toxic monitoring report. It's an excellent report. Keep up the good work. Moving on, our quality data are, that was submitted electronically to all the board members. Any questions around the our toxic data report? Our quality and our toxic report, no questions. What about the enforcement status report? Any questions on that?
I was curious what the status of the older SWIP stuff is. I understand that, you know, that came up in the hearing recently. I was curious if there's any progress in that.
Mr. Wen, could you provide some details on that for me, please?
Yes, there's a draft report order that's been circulated to SWIFT, and they're currently reviewing it now.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we hope to get that, the earliest probably on the June
Okay.
board meeting.
Thank you.
Access emission report, any questions on that one? The complaint investigation. I mentioned earlier to Steve, I'd like the page 7 where you have a summary of all the ongoing investigations on the complaint investigation status. That's very helpful. Thank you. Lawn care, any questions on that? If not, I'd like to thank everyone who took part in today's meeting. This meeting is adjourned until Wednesday, May 17th, 2023 at 10 a.m. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Resources.